Hey everyone, today we're doing a portrait photo shoot so I can share what I love and what I don't love so much about the camera of the iPhone 14 Pro Max for both photo and video. Let's go start our photo shoot. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has a main camera of 48 megapixels. I'm starting off taking photos in Jpeg, which means I end up with 12 megapixel files. In order to be able to access the full 48 megapixels, you need to shoot in Pro RAW. The main camera uses the full frame equivalent of a 24mm focal length, which is a focal length I personally love using for photography with my mirrorless camera. The 24mm on the 14 Pro is just a little bit wider than the previous two Pro iPhones, which were 26mm. The 14 Pro also has an aperture of f1.78.
And then maybe if you bring like your shoulder in towards your chin a little. Yeah, perfect. 1, 2, 3.
I took a photo in the same spot in RAW and JPEG. When you zoom in to 100%, you can see how much more detail and resolution we have in the 48 megapixel file. I think the Pro RAW file looks absolutely beautiful. You can see so much detail, the highlights and shadows are easily recoverable with editing, and I like that it doesn't look over-sharpened. In this next location, I want to try and shoot in some different lighting scenarios to see how the camera handles it. We were shooting with direct light before, which is very ideal for phones as you get a lot of light into the image. Here we have some shade and also my favorite kind of lighting, which is also tricky, backlight. The reason backlight is tricky for both phones and cameras to shoot with is you have the sun directly streaming into your lens, which can cause low contrast, and thus it's hard to focus and maintain details in the final shot.
This is so pretty. So I'm gonna start just cropping just above the knee. Oh, I love how flowy it is. It looks so cool.
I think the main camera did a great job for the most part in this lighting. I captured some really nice photos that were balanced in lighting. You can see Louisa and the background very clearly.
Oh, okay, we got some sun. It's really nice. And I'll get like a little bit closer up here as well.
One aspect I have noticed over the past year of using the 13 Pro Max and is still happening in the 14 Pro Max is the AI processing of JPEG photos can look harsh or overdone, especially in backlight.
Since the sun has come out and we're shooting backlit, I am going to switch to RAW now and we're going to see what we can do with these files. I like that with your hands up, so 1, 2, 3.
Sometimes when I know it's a tough lighting situation to work with, I will choose to switch over to RAW, just so I can have full control over what the image looks like. I find the AI processing on JPEG files sometimes over-sharpens photos, and in backlight it likes to brighten the subject, which can sometimes look a bit unnatural. Here is a good example of where the JPEG processing brightened Louisa in the first photo, didn't brighten her in the next photo, and then brightened her again in the last photo. I love what the second photo looks like. She is still well exposed in the image, and it looks sharper on the subject as well because it's not overexposing her. It would be great to have an option to turn this processing on or off for situations like this, as I don't always want to shoot in RAW and have to edit my photos.
Just here if you wanted to stand like on that little ledge, and we'll shoot with this in the background.
Next up, we are moving into the shade to test out the ultra-wide camera. This camera is 12 megapixels, is the full frame equivalent of 13mm with a 120-degree field of view and has an aperture of f2.2.
I love that. Actually, if you wanted to just like walk across and I'll follow you. And if you do like super exaggerated, like, it'll look cool.
The ultra-wide camera is so fun to take portraits with. I am purposely composing Louisa's feet and legs towards the edge of the frame to exaggerate the ultra-wide look.
And then do you want to also do one sitting on the little ledge as well? Yes, oh, I love that.
I am also sharing straight out of the camera unedited photos throughout this entire video so you can see exactly what the iPhone captures. And then, of course, my edited version as well. I decided to edit all these photos with my Hazel Lightroom preset pack, which I'll leave linked down below if you want to see more before and after examples. And I ended up using my preset on both the JPEGs and the RAW files, and it worked really well on both.
On the wide angle camera, on the ultra wide, I need to tap and lower the exposure on the screen because it just looks so bright when it does it automatically. Like you can see, Louisa's face looks a bit overexposed in her cheeks and stuff, so I keep having to pull it down. On the main camera, I just left it as is and it was good with the exposure. I love this blue archway here in the background. I'm going to try and use that to frame our next portrait. So we're going to be using the 2x zoom, which makes use of digital zoom of the main camera. Yeah, that looks so cool in the background. I don't want it to frame you perfectly. I just want like a hint of it on the side there. That's so pretty. 2x digital zoom is the full frame equivalent of 48mm. Coming from the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I'm happy we have a better quality zoom option in between the main camera and the 3x telephoto camera. When I wanted to capture a zoomed in photo on the 13 Pro, sometimes 3x optical zoom was just too much zoom. So I like that we have a 48mm focal length option in between now. I'll get a raw image here. Since it is making use of digital zoom, you can tell the overall quality and sharpness of 2x zoom is not as good as the main camera or 3x telephoto, but I do think it's still usable. Just like ultra wide, the phone also wanted to overexpose a lot of my shots in 2x zoom, and I kept having to pull down the brightness. Would you be able to sit like in between the pots? Next up, we're gonna try 3x optical zoom. So this is the telephoto lens of the iPhone Pro. And I've got this little spot here. I thought it would be cool to try and get some of these purple flowers in the shot. Oh yeah, you can see them really nicely. Oh, it matches the ring too. Oh, it's all coming together. The 3x optical telephoto camera is 12 megapixels, has a 77mm full frame equivalent focal length, and an aperture of f2.8. I absolutely love what the telephoto camera looks like. It especially shines when taking close-up photos in good, bright lighting. It has plenty of details, nice colors, nice skin tones, and it exposes the photos nicely, just like the main camera. I have another JPEG versus RAW comparison I took in the same spot. Again, if you don't want to have so much sharpening applied to your straight out of the camera JPEG photos, the RAW photos are really nice to work with and look a bit softer, which I think is a good thing, especially for portraits. I also took some further away photos. The mid-length photos look great, but in the full body shot, I noticed the camera was struggling to focus on the subject. This could be because it's quite a busy location though, as it looks like the photo is sharp on the plants in the background instead.
You're in pretty locations, Liz.
Am I?
Yeah. Hold on. I need to zoom out.
These are my bins.
Something else I would love to see for the 3x telephoto camera is a higher resolution sensor to be able to capture 48 megapixel files like the main camera. On the Pixel 6 Pro last year, we had a 48 megapixel telephoto camera which looked so beautiful. I would have thought that with the new iPhone 14 Pro, they would want to match that.
We're gonna try out portrait mode with the 1x, 2x, and 3x camera, and I'll put them all up side by side on the screen for you. So we're gonna start off with 1x. The last thing I want to do is take a photo on each of the lenses. So I'm going to start on ultra wide and end up on 3x zoom, and I'll put them all up side by side on the screen.
Finally, we have some video tests to take a look at. First up, I'm filming some shots of Louisa in 4K 60p with the main camera. As usual, I really love what video looks like from the iPhone Pro line. The colors look great, the amount of sharpening is nice, and I love how stable the footage is, even though I am walking around to get some different angles. All this footage is unedited and straight out of the camera, so you can see exactly what it looks like. I also love what the ultra-wide looks like in video mode. If you don't have a lot of light to work with, ultra-wide video can look a little noisy in the darkest parts of the footage, so if you keep an eye out on the shadows of the plants, you can see that is starting to happen here. But overall, I do love the look of this ultra-wide lens for both photo and video. While I think 2x zoom looks fine for photo, I'm actually really impressed what it looks like for video. While it's not as sharp as the main camera, the footage is still really clear and stable. I think this 2x footage has a really nice look to it. The colors and exposure so far has all been really consistent throughout ultrawide, main camera, and 2x zoom as well. Finally, the 3x telephoto video is okay. I think it would have looked better if we had more light. During these shots, it got a bit dark and cloudy, so the footage is not really sharp on Louisa's face, and it was having some trouble getting the right exposure as well. It was too bright in some spots on her face. I also thought it would be interesting to try a walking shot, and surprisingly, IBIS worked well considering how zoomed in we are.
So I also want to check out the apertures that we have in cinematic mode. So this is f2, the widest aperture we have, so the most depth of field. And then you can adjust that so it's a little less extreme if you want.
One big improvement we have from the 13 Pro to the 14 is that we can now film up to 4K in cinematic mode on the 14 Pro with both the front and rear camera. You could only do that up to 1080p cinematic mode on the 13 Pro. You have the option of 24, 25 or 30 frames per second, so you still can't do any slow-mo in this mode. So that is all I have for today's review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max camera. I really hope you enjoyed watching that and seeing all the example images. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I make new videos every single week, so I will see you all next time. Bye!